Rajesh, could we have the live stream link to send to some people who might want to live stream to look at the recording rather than, I mean.
Sure. Moment. Yeah. I'll soon put it in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah. So we can start. Over to you, Adar. Please start.
Thank you, Rajesh. So hello, everyone, and welcome to the In Conversation series number 14, where Slavo Radosevic will be interviewed by Carlota Perez. My name is Arthur Moreira. I'm a final year PhD student at SPRU, University of Sussex, and I'm really happy to facilitate this event today. The In Conversation series portray prominent innovation scholars in the form of intellectual biographical interviews. So this is part of the Chris Freeman Centenary Lecture Series, which is organized by the Consortium for Research on Innovation Studies, CRIS. And the CRIS is a global network of innovation scholars working towards creating learning and competence building opportunities for early career scholars, especially from the Global South. It was founded in 2021. By a few early career innovation scholars who met at Globelix and bounded by its inclusive and egalitarian spirit. During COVID times, they got together to organize a lecture series on theoretical foundations of innovation systems, mainly for the benefit of students and early career researchers from the developing countries. It was named Christopher Freeman Centenary Lecture Series as it coincided with the birth centenary year of Chris Freeman. But in response to the huge demand from the audience, the activities continue beyond the centenary year. So please visit the network's website to watch the previous webinars and to have access to more material there. So today's 2-hour agenda is divided into 2 halves. In the first hour, after these introductions, Carlota will run an intellectual biographical interview with Slavo. Then we have a 5-minute break, so you can go drink some water, stretch your legs. And after the break, both the audience and a panel of 3 scholars will engage with Slavo. First the panel, then the audience. So please make sure to type in your well-framed questions in a precise form in the chat. Rajesh and I will keep track of the order. We'll pick them, the questions, and we'll ask you to unmute yourselves and to ask the questions. The ones that can't be addressed because of time will be sent to Slavo afterwards. Contributing to the conversation between Slavo and Carlota are GABRIELA DUTRENIT, YANNIS CALOGHIROU, and Nicholas VONORTAS. And now we'll briefly introduce them later on. But my task here is very basic. I'm introducing Carlota, and she will be the one introducing Slavo. And I also have to keep track of time, so all participants, including the audience, have their respective fair share of these 2 hours. So I'll start with Carlota. I introduce her every so often in another series of webinars that we run together with the team in the discussion group on policy experience in Latin America. By the way, we have an activity on the 12th of December, but I can share it later on. But because today it is about Slavo's work and we want to hear Slavo addressing Carlota's questions, I'll keep it short. You can read all the extended biographies in the network website, including the great exclusive autobiographical note that Slavo produced. Really good, go there. So just a small personal note, I want to thank Carlota in the name of all young scholars present here, because many of us who had the privilege to be in Falmer, or in London, or in Tallinn and meet her, know that she's really committed to interacting with us, giving us a bit of her time as a mentor, and for me as a friend, sharing her beliefs about how we can contribute to try to influence better policy in the Global South. And the others who haven't met her in person still benefit because she's very active in events such as this one. So thanks a lot. Carlota is a British Venezuelan researcher, lecturer, and international consultant. She's an honorary professor at the Institute for Innovation and Public Purpose, UCL, and at the Science Policy Research Unit, SPRU, University of Sussex. She's also adjunct professor of technology and socioeconomic development at the YANNIS School of Innovation Government at Tallinn, Estonia. So over to you, Carlota. Please say some words about Slavo, and you can start your interview. Thank you. And don't forget.
Thank you. Slavo, you should unmute yourself. Well,
yes, you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
It's
great.
wonderful. I think it's a wonderful opportunity to be able to talk to somebody who, apart from being an important contributor to the innovation literature, is, I would say, he is the top researcher in the whole of the Central and Eastern European countries. But everything that he says is actually useful for every other aspect of the development world, the efforts for development. So I want to begin by asking Slavo something quite important, because he is somebody who has spent more than 7 years working as a public servant on top jobs in the government of his original country, Croatia. And I think that's a very important aspect of why his work is so relevant. Precisely, I wanted to ask Slavo, your experience of so many years in public service, it actually makes you rather unique among innovation scholars, most of whom have spent their whole careers in the academic world. How much and in what way do you think that first-hand experience with practice inside government has influenced the way you study innovation policy?
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank organizers for inviting me. It's a great, really privilege, honor, and moreover, to have Carlota, you as a counterpart is something incredible. So I couldn't ask for more. Because I'm not kind of a typical scholar in the sense, as you rightly pointed in your question, who started in academy and then goes along the academic lines. My first actually 12 years of career where you actually professionally formed was done as a civil servant, as a government economist, very much engaged in generating policy, analyzing first policies. And of course, that shapes you. You know, first 12 years of your professional development is something which stays with you. And when I think about it, in which way it shaped me, I think first it shapes me regarding the topics that you choose. They do not come kind of from economic theory as usual, you know, looking what other people have done or trying to think from the academic side, but you primarily think about the relevance of the issues, you know, kind of whether they seems to you kind of relevant from the kind of, let's call it, reality check perspective. Then also your research design and how you go is much more kind of down to earth, is different. But the most important, you try to think much more about the policy implication. What does it tells me about the issue and problem that I'm looking? So in my case, I give it really great importance because in most of the academic papers, policy implication, policy side comes like an afterthought of the analysis. You do analysis and say, oh, what it has to do, what can be done with that? In my case, that's much more than the afterthought of the analysis. And actually, a few years ago, I had the privilege to look at the innovation studies literature, looking at the evolutionary perspective, different papers, with the aim to really look at the policy implications of that, or who needs that kind of. And I managed to publish that because Korean's colleague invited me as a paper, so you can read that kind of the gap which exists, and I don't know if it will always exist between the academic discourse and the policy implications and policy world, but I'm continuously aware of this gap, and probably what will characterize, our debate is really the existence of that gap, whether that gap is something which is a natural, cannot be bridged, or something can be done in kind of making that gap a bit narrower, closer. So yeah, that would be my brief answer. Yeah.
Quite important. And you also worked interviewing firms in Croatia for a technology capability study, I understand. As you know, Chris Freeman, also did that in his early career before Sprue. How much do you think you learned by direct contact with entrepreneurs and managers of companies? I know you continue to contact firms whenever possible, but how much and in what way do you think those visits and conversations with real-life innovators influence your theoretical work today?
Yes, I'm kind of innovation studies scholar, the same as many people, present here. And whenever I go, even doing a kind of high-level advisory policy consultancy in some East European countries, then I always insist, if possible, and in many cases I succeed, to talk to companies to understand how that kind of policy context is reflected in that. And early in my career, and even as a government economist, I had the privilege to have a funding to do firm level research, and that was the time in the 80s. I contacted Carl Dahlman, maybe some people know the name, who was one of the first economists that look at the firms from technology capability perspective, because many people here are working along these lines. I know that GABRIELA has done her PhD along this line. So I simply asked him to send me the methodology questionnaire. That was the time when they were exploring I remember vividly, a Brazilian company, Usiminas, and the others. So I found myself with the opportunity to adopt fully that approach and apply it in the case of several companies, because I had people that which were kind of sector specialists, so I worked with them. We visited these companies, and I learned tremendously in that case. Actually, I don't think innovation studies scholar can be a kind of fully fledged developed scholar without having in-depth understanding of processes which are going on. And especially now, I think with the cases of artificial intelligence, that may be even more important. However, that seems a kind of different. So first thing you understand is the complexity of the firm itself. Firm is not a black box. You can read about the organizational capabilities, but one thing is going there and see, how companies are operating and what makes their organizational capabilities good or bad or average. This is something which, as we know from the literature, is very difficult to grasp, to understand. So that's the first thing. You get a much better understanding, and you see the limitations of any data that you can, put in relation to that company. That is very difficult to grasp what makes that firm unique, or what makes it profile of capability as it is. And second thing, that any enterprise operates in economic institutional context. I worked initially in my early years in the socialist system, which was actually a system where you had a much more kind of, was not a centrally planned system, was a kind of, had elements of strong market economy and very strong import substitution. In that respect, was very similar to Latin America. So that's why my kind of intellectual inspiration from that time was largely from dependencia literature. But in terms of technology capability, you understand how the system of import substitution shapes strategies of companies and why they behave in the way they behave. When they have a strong foreign trade protection, they are cost insensitive, but then they have more incentives to diversify, to expand production. So you get a feel how companies' behavior is intimately and strongly inseparable from the features of the economic and institutional system, of the social context in which they operate. And once you get that intimate understanding, then I think you carry that with you, and that helps you to understand really what is behind the data and what statistical evidence can tell you and what is behind that. So I find it essential for anybody who is into innovation studies, because innovation is, we know, neo-Schumpeterians, we don't follow macro distinction. We know that the structural change takes place at a micro level, but it has a huge macro implications, and therefore to understand that dynamic, one has to have a good understanding of all three levels, but the micro level, firm level, is the one where that transformation, you see that it is kind of conflictual nature or trade-offs in that transformation. Yeah, so that's in a nutshell why I think that CRIS was on the right track.
Yeah, actually, CRIS often said that if you don't know what's behind the data, you don't understand what the data say. You've got to go directly. And today, surveys and interviews are not in fashion. It's econometrics, econometrics, econometrics. So do you think, I mean, you're constantly doing both. You work with data, but you also work with metrics. You talk to the public and private actors, but how do you feel that connection? Because you work a lot with metrics, but at the same time, you do the surveys. So what's your view on that? You more or less just said something, but you didn't talk about metrics as specifically. What's your view on metrics?
Well, we live today in a world where metrics dominates. It's actually, you can't imagine anything because of the sheer availability of data. When I think about the availability of data 30 years ago and now, it's another world. So in science, in research, there is the Solar Prize statement who says instrumentation drives the progress in science. In our case, instrumentation, data, computers now, and the whole social sciences becomes much more information intensive, capital intensive. You can't do anything on your own. You have to have always several people, and we know it in not only in medicine but in social sciences. Increasing number of papers are co-authored. So yes, I do also a type of quantitative research, and I'm very lucky, privileged to work with people which are very good in quantitative methods. Also, I enjoy really exploring, analyzing data, but at the same time, one has to be aware what data can tell you, because data at the end indicators also social constructs. And today we can put data on anything, so to say, kind of, if you think about the different composite indicators, many variables are based on subjective data, and then we treat them as very, very objective, kind of. So there's a lot of there, kind of, which one can, think about it. But I think that both sides are necessary. The issue is only that today we probably have a dominance and really data rule all around, and we lose then kind of qualitative insights. And the issue is the balance between these two. But today we are on one side of that balance, and probably because the whole ICT goes in the sense that we will be able to monitor, quantify everything around. Kind of, I think that will actually increase the value of qualitative insight, or something which is beyond the data, exactly because you can quantify everything, and that leads to this kind of similar to when you have technological revolutions in your work. Then the things which you codify, then they open new areas for tacit knowledge. There is almost like dynamic relationship between yes, you understand something, but then you understand also what you don't understand, and you understand it even more. And that's a kind of continuous cycle of the more you codify things, you understand, you quantify, then you see how little you know. So I see it as that kind of circle. The problem with the methodological, with the econometrics for me today, I think we are reaching the limits of that approach, is that it's very difficult to grasp the context when you have a data. And to understand the data, you have to understand the context. And I take context much more seriously because in econometric literature, you have ambition that you can control for the context, that you can understand the context because you simply say, well, I control for all variables, which are part of the context. But then when you think about there is a new research on causality in sciences, and there is a very nice book of Why by Judea Pearl and the other authors who basically clearly show that if you control for everything, then you basically introduce new biases. So there are limits to which you can understand the context by controlling for all variables in that context. And the context is something which we don't take seriously. I haven't seen the kind of monograph which would really kind of from philosophy of science point of view give us something more in depth in terms of thinking of relationship between the variables and the context, because context cannot be reduced to control a variable. Of course, case study method offers the best way to contextualize these explanations. And in my kind of own work, I learned a lot from very good case studies. And there are a few colleagues, some of them are actually even probably listening, watching this. I can say I learned more from your qualitative insight than from many econometric papers. Why? Because econometric paper has to start with hypothesis, So you already have a kind of a view. And we know that in many cases, this is simply falsification of the process, because in reality, what you do, you try to explore, you try to find something new. And in case study approach, very often you have much more scope to discover something new, to be surprised. And especially in the context of again, technological change, there are new things which you cannot predict. Who can know how artificial intelligence will influence organizational capabilities of firms? This is something which you really then have to talk with people and try to understand it better. So opening new lines of inquiry, I think, is something which is extremely important and can be done mainly in a qualitative way. After that, what I see in economics is actually, I see qualitative insights, and then comes a bunch of econometric studies. Why? Because the question is formulated. There is a kind of a paradigm established, and then comes, okay, now you have an industry of papers which tries to, but there is this qualitative insight which kind of comes from individual insight, and that's why I consider that kind of as a really complementary, and the issue is of the right balance between these two. Yeah, so that's in a nutshell.
It's not really a choice. It's not really a choice for students currently. I mean, they're really, the publisher Perez force is just pushing them into doing mainly econometrics. It's really difficult for them to choose. But let's move on to your area of specialization now, because you come from Croatia.
Maybe Carlota, just to maybe complete that, I forgot that I think that this boundary between qualitative and quantitative is fortunately or unfortunately kind of a breaking down with the methodologies which basically merge both perspectives. Even if you think about machine learning, kind of this is something which you try to get from a variety of sources, and then you try to, in a quantitative way, to explore it. If you think about there is methodological qualitative comparative analysis, where you take case studies and then you try to distill variables from that, and then you can test it. So the things are now much more diverse, but there is this dominance still today. I think it's changing, but you are right. There is a dominance of.
Well, that's very good news. I hope you're right. Okay, yeah. Coming from Croatia in the former Yugoslavia, you have mainly specialized in the Central and Eastern European countries and the Soviet Union. Not many innovation scholars study that region. So which would you say are the main specificities of innovation systems there? And how has the restructuring taken place after the change into market economies?
Well, this is a question where you try, which will actually be topic of my book, which I was supposed to start already now, and I'm
starting very slowly, but struggling to find time in addition to hundreds of other things. Because there is this complex transformative process of the last 30 years where many people know bits and pieces of that, and I've kind of been privileged enough when I came to SPRU to specialize in that. I didn't want to move to something else because I said this is where I have some understanding. But if I was to kind of try kind of a few bullet points to say what is a kind of main specificity and how the restructuring process has taken place, I think after 30 years, if I look at it from the innovation system perspective, then one could say innovation system in these countries are still not kind of business sector based. They are still have lots of legacies from the past, which are partly developmental legacies. The legacy was that firms were not the main agents of innovation process because the innovation was scattered. The whole range of business functions was scattered across the hierarchy. Of course, that was very much different in my country where I come from former Yugoslavia countries, when I compare it with the kind of orthodox Soviet system, where indeed the whole business functions, if you think about the marketing, which was in Foreign Trade Organization, R&D was in industrial institutes, in Academy of Sciences, procurement was in another ministry, and so the commonality in transformation process is how do you reconstitute enterprises from something which were just production units, even not having finance departments, kind of, and how did they become reconstituted as individual enterprises? And that process was very much different from country to country because they were they were on a different distance compared to the kind of this orthodox Soviet system, and was much easier in countries where I come from, kind of. So and then we have, so that is one commonality. Then we have a common restructuring processes, erosion of R&D in all countries to different degrees. Then we have a recovery, and then we have a erosion during the 90s. Then we have a recovery during the 2008, and after 2008 we have a really new processes of divergence, slowing of growth, and a kind of issue, what are the new drivers? And this is something which is kind of evolving before our eyes. And the system, if we think from innovation system perspective, are very much fragmented, and I call them dual innovation system, in the sense that you have in many countries you have a dominance of FDI, but the issue is whether this FDI integrated, what are the spillovers from FDI. So they're kind of, in many cases, unrelated to the rest of the enterprises. And then you have on an upstream side, especially in countries which are members of the EU, you have this integration of R&D system into the EU excellence network, but in between you don't have much. So there is a kind of dual innovation system, which is a kind of reflection of the nature of integration of these economies, but they represent also the structural weakness. So this is in a kind of nutshell, on a very, very rough sketches, first take. Of course, there is a variety of country differences, and these are kind of all, let's call it, different shades of gray. So that's in a nutshell how I would describe it very roughly. Kind of.
This separation makes me wonder if this idea of the risk of having an R&D entrepreneurship, sort of to promote that sort of thing without connecting it with the bulk of the industry of the country might actually be a mistake. We might be interested in looking at that problem. Innovation scholars and national systems of innovation and so on could risk promoting innovation in isolation rather than promoting innovation within companies. But anyway, those are things to think about.
No, you hit the right point, because this is also partly driven by the dominant policy discourse, which is not only Eastern Europe. I mean, there are people here from Latin America, from Asia, and there is a view of innovation policy which is reduced on the R&D-based growth. Therefore, you support new technology-based firms. But then when I look at this part of the world, then new technology-based firms are part of the segment. They are macroeconomically still not important. And then you completely ignore what is going on in the existing enterprises, especially in the larger enterprises that there are linkages. So there is a kind of lots of biases why this situation is like it is today, because it can be corrected. It could have been corrected, but we are part of the story of that, because we don't give enough attention to the overall range of technology activities, because some of them are difficult to grasp, to capture. Yeah.
You just talked about the heterogeneous nature of both the countries themselves because of their past, some having been completely centralized, some perhaps not so much, and some having had a previous development like Czechoslovakia that were European semi-advanced countries before. So actually that makes a lot of difference. Do you think that we appreciate that sort of heterogeneity elsewhere? I mean, how important do you think it is to actually look at those differences?
Yeah, I work on the region which actually stretches from Estonia, Baltics. I come from Balkans, which is south there, lots of connections in Greece. And then at the same time, I'll be going in a few weeks' time to Uzbekistan, which is Central Asia, which is completely different parts of the world. So we have a kind of region which people will say how you can look at that kind of huge diversity. Well, there are countries at different levels of development. And these differences were there 150 years ago. And some of these differences are still present today. And I think that a richness and this diversity is something which I kind of appreciate, because then you understand the relationship between the technology accumulation, so to say, and economic restructuring, economic growth. You understand that our discussion before about the metrics, that you cannot have one metrics, that these are kind of countries in different levels of development, different types of economic system, different political economies, from authoritarian to kind of more liberal democracies. And of course, then we have also within the European Union also something that's called a liberal kind of democracy. So the story becomes even more complicated. Then we had this transition. So there were differences from the past. Then we have differences during the 90s, during this transition period, where the differences in political economy, in the sense to which they were kind of embracing the Washington consensus logic, the extent to which they tried to engage in a very much different way towards the foreign capital and technology. In some countries, this is a drama which evolves until today. In some countries, like current members of the EU, kind of they didn't have almost structurally choice, kind of. So these are countries which are very much dominated by foreign direct investment. So I have this kind of distinction which I developed between the domestic-led and foreign-led modernization, kind of, which is hugely reflected in the patterns of technology accumulation, in the data which you see in these countries. You have differences in terms of resources. In some countries, you have resource-based rents, which completely kind of squeeze this push for technology rents. In other countries, they don't have choice. Kind of technology rents creation possibility, to growth is the only option. So, and then we have processes which will kind of shift towards the market economy during the 90s, but then hitting the limits of that. Kind of you have then a reversal of this transition process, which goes back from marketization, so to say, towards stronger role of state, which now becomes more normal as the state is coming back, and very different roles of the state in that context. So it's a kind of, for me, is extremely a rich area where linking what we as innovation scholars are doing with the overall social context and social conditions of that innovative enterprises are hugely important research area. But unfortunately, there are not many of us who are working in a comparative way in this part of the world. There are only a few people here, some of the colleagues here. So I think it's a huge gap in innovation studies area. So I hope I'm just one who probably my ambition is through that book to show to the others that this is a that in the context of the emerging economies, that there is a part of the world which requires kind of a research in itself. It's enough interesting and relevant and can provide us a range of new insights. Yeah, so I think that's enough for.
You have often mentioned that Mariana points out that innovation is political, and that has some consequences that maybe we don't take into account usually. How do you point that out?
Well, I prepare intentionally. This is Mariana's, I don't know if you can see, yeah, innovation. This is from Mariana. This is a kind of card which she has. She has also a T-shirt which are saying the same. Because I think that of course, in our area, innovation studies, you can be very technocratic, I would say, and you can reduce everything on your data. You look at the indicators, you look at the growth, you explore what determines innovation, what determines firm productivity, and you can stay within that angle. And I'm quite fine with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But we know that at the end, something which I think the term is correct one, can be called technology accumulation, is a social, political, economic, broader process, and is shaped by a variety of forces. Who controls the modernization process? Who are the owners, kind of companies? What is their strategic horizon? What is the strategic horizon of the state? Who is in control of the state? These are all issues which are shaping the technology accumulation. So I think that especially now, today, with the role of the high tech or big companies, that becomes even more important. So I think that the whole new agenda will come in the future, which I would call political economy of technology accumulation. So finally, your work and your future book will reveal a lot of these things, and will, I think, will be one of the major contributions to this area. So I think ball is in your side.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to
propaganda for me. Good. Now let's go to your contributions. You have developed metrics, surprisingly, for evaluating technological upgrading. Tell us a bit about that. And would you say, again, that your first-hand experience was an important input that gave you both the capability and the desire to design how to do that sort of measurement?
Yes, now you hit the kind of how did I come to that? I didn't come to that kind of, thinking something theoretically. It simply came for a very simple reason. In the European Union, in Europe, we have a dominant metric, which many people watching this know, European Innovation Scoreboard. And then I work on these countries which are kind of were at the bottom of that scale of European Innovation Scoreboard. And from my perspective, many of the indicators there were not really the most significant for these countries. And especially, I was annoyed with the fact that policymakers in these countries then take these indicators as policy objectives. So to give you an example, I listen to a Hungarian policymaker who suddenly worries that Hungary doesn't have many US patents. And why? Because on that scale, they are really, relatively behind, definitely behind top countries. But then I was kind of annoyed with that idea that policymaker took that as the main problem of the country, because he looked at the metrics only. And on the metrics, if he increases some of the indicators, he will go up and he thinks country will do well. But he's basically chasing a irrelevant point, because country is not at the technology frontier. US patent is important, but it shouldn't be the objective of the policy. There are many other kind of policy issues and indicators which can reflect that. So I came to that being fully aware that metrics are hugely important today in the world, because metrics are not just numbers. Metrics define and structure the problem. So in this case, if I tell you US patent is your main problem, then you think, my God, yes, my frontier science is my main problem. But you are middle income economy, let's say, and then US patent is not your main problem. You have a range of other major problems. But then how do you generate the kind of structured metrics and framework for problems which are more relevant for you. So basically, I came to that as my reaction to this idea that there can be one universal metrics, and that's why I came with a colleague with us in York, who I'm very grateful. We work together and do some quantitative analysis also to show that there is alternative metrics which is suitable for a specific group of countries. And I don't believe that there can be one general metrics in the case of technology accumulation, because you operate in so many different levels of countries which have production capability problem, which have a problem of absorption. Only some companies are maybe on the technology frontier. So this is the idea that matrices are framework how we structure the problem, and therefore we shouldn't take them as a gods. And the more of them, the better, because then we show how problem can be presented, and then policymaker can choose which one of them is most relevant for them, because the dominance of one metric is devastating. Well, today maybe we have too many of them, but each of them is based on some kind of understanding of the real processes. So this, in some way, this is a fight for the relevance of matrices. Yeah, so that's how I see it.
Yeah, I think you always say that realistic measurements are more important and more useful than ideal ones. So now, referring to that same relationship between what is innovation at the frontier and what is learning from behind, after working all these years with innovation and development, what would you say is the essential part played by innovation in the process, in contrast with learning to sort of catch up? And how do you see the connection happening? What's your...
Yes, that is a question where I have a problem to separate innovation from learning, because for me, innovation is a part of the learning. And it's why? Because learning, for me, these are processes by which innovation gets adapted, gets improved, and learning is, at the end, core of organizational capabilities, because organizational capabilities affirm a reflection of the variety of learning processes which takes place in a company. And I'm sure that GABRIELA, who will come later on, has a lot to say about that. And whether that learning takes place or not is then, really a crucial question. Because if learning takes place, innovation will come by itself, kind of. So in that respect, the most interesting things, of course, we have a research which looks at it entirely on a firm level, but there are learning processes which you can see which are also conditioned by the broader factors in the social system. This is a kind of, for me, also a new unexplored area. That's why I like this Lazonic's idea of social conditions of innovative enterprise, because these social conditions determine the type of learning that takes place, and then that leads to specific types of innovation. So for me, these are kind of two facets of the same issue. Yeah.
Now I'd like to go to my favorite topic, institutional innovation. This is something I've been fighting for years. To me, it's increasingly important for successful development processes to learn about how institutional innovation is made. And I don't see enough efforts trying to understand what successful policies are, why they are successful, how does policy innovation take place, how to evaluate innovation policy so that we can learn more about how to innovate in policy. Do you agree that this is a problem? I mean, you have done research on learning networks and other policy innovations. Do you think the innovation studies community has paid enough attention to that?
To policy innovations, you mean? Yeah. First of all, I mean
innovation in government, innovation in the institutions that actually handle development, because we seem to think that innovation only happens in business, somehow. Maybe organizational innovation, but policy innovation is crucial, and now more than ever when the state is coming back. And we have no idea how those things are done, how you can promote it to happen more. I mean, it's really a big, big gaping hole, I feel.
Well, we are moving from the comforts of the, let's say, economics of technological change towards this dirty world of the policy, where the boundaries also between innovation policy studies and public policy. And in my recent work with George and Despina, I was forced to kind of to enter into a range of literature which is beyond the innovation policy. Well, policy innovations, they belong to part of a generic category of institutional innovations, and I'm kind of skeptical towards the term itself, because I think that the institutional innovations and policy innovations, they are to a large extent also results of the political processes, and whether something can be on a paper fantastic, but at the end, whether this will be implemented and how it will be shaped is really dependent on a variety of political factors in the country. Maybe our discussion can be focused about the yes, there are policy innovations in this area. If you think about the new public management, which was dominant until recently, that was one kind of innovation, but that was a reflection of political context. Yeah. So there are innovations. In our case, in case especially in Europe, we have this innovation which is called a smart specialization, which was a policy invention, so to say, from Dominique Faure and two other colleagues, kind of, and that was a kind of a situation where, so to say, conceptualization went ahead of the practice, and then everybody's trying to understand what it is. You're absolutely right that there is not enough systematic thinking of the new ways how to go about it, kind of. And I work on the region where actually anything about the policy that was done was taken from the shelf of the EU, so to say. And you have this huge problem of bias in that context. You have incapacity to understand what are your technological challenges or upgrading challenges, and what will be appropriate policy instruments. So in that respect, I see the lack of policy innovation as an inability to have this critical distance towards your own understanding of your country sectoral context. So to a large extent, these are kind of blind spots which are very much result of the dominant paradigm. If people think that the innovation comes from R&D, they will forget about any other policies, because they will be focused on R&D tax credits, kind of. So the problem is partly academic, but to a large extent, this is a kind of dominance of the discourses, which is a partly academic, but partly is a cultural, political, and so on. So it's a messy area where we academics in this area have also part of our responsibility. Yeah, so we are part of the problem as well.
Yeah, what I find most painful is that while political scientists who know nothing about innovation are doing work on policy design, the people who are expert in innovation are not studying that process, which is so crucial, because without policy, everybody says policy recommendations. So you actually mean that the instrument to do what it is that you're studying is actually not studied. So it's a hole. It's a huge hole. I find it very strange. But anyway.
Yeah. No, Carlota. But maybe the reason is that the subject that we are studying is also continuously changing. Kind of. So it's almost like it's changing, because we work in an area which kind of cannot be, so to say, cannot have its established paradigm, because the subject is changing. If you have to think about the policy for artificial intelligence today, it's quite different from the basic digitalization 10 years ago, or something which was a kind of 30 years ago dominant. Kind of. So we are changing we are faced with a continuously changing setting in which we operate. So that's a small excuse. Just
all the more important to understand how policy has to change. But
I agree.
anyway,
I agree fully.
let's go to your contributions. If you had to choose only two of your contributions, one or two, to the field of innovation studies, which ones would you pick?
Well, I hope I'm not still that old that I can say finally any major contributions, but let me put it on a much more, down to earth level. I can, if I think a bit more critically, I will say yes, I contributed in some areas a little bit conceptually. I developed, this idea of entrepreneurial propensity of innovation system. Why? Because I was surrounded by colleagues who were working on entrepreneurship as individual phenomenon, crunching this data which exists in GEM, Global Entrepreneurship Monitor. And I was coming from a system of innovation. And then the whole idea was, entrepreneurship is also a collective phenomenon. It's not only individual phenomenon. Of course, this was a reflection why they were working, or this idea of the whole neoliberal system, that the heroic entrepreneur, very Schumpeterian kind of. Well, I'm more inclined towards this kind of seeing also that individual does not operate in an empty vacuum. So on the empirical side, I've done a lot of work on East European countries, trying to show exactly that the determinants of growth in these countries are much more related to which Martin Bell, Keith Pavitt would call production capability. We even have a recent paper, econometrical, where we show that productivity is driven by not by R&D, but is driven by production capabilities. So I try to kind of bring the insights from the innovation studies, and then kind of checking, then testing them through empirical work on this part of the world. And of course, all thinking about the innovation system is there. So, but I would say, I hope I haven't done my last word. So.
Good. No, I'm sure you haven't. So now, sort of going back to the beginning, do you think that personal experience, field work, and interviews are important for academics to be able to make relevant recommendations? Would you recommend that somehow they manage to connect more strongly?
Yeah, we come to the beginning, how we started, because you put point on these recommendations. Because I had experience on both sides, and I know how our work operates in the context of when it comes on the table of administrator, of high-level policymaker. Then I would say that our major impact is not in the recommendations. That may disappoint some people. This is not like idea. Enlightened policy makers said, "Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you very much. This is genius proposal." Why? Because I think whether he will implement that recommendation or not depends on a variety of other factors. You are just one of the inputs. So I think our main impact will be in the way how we frame the problems, from which then some recommendations will follow. So I would say that I feel much happier when I change the way how policymakers think. This is the same as with students. When you give a new perspective to students, and when you influence policymakers in a way how he see the problem now, if he see problem now in a different way, I think you've done your job, because the solution, he is the one who knows much better what will be the solution, as long as you agree on the definition of the problem. So this is how I would evaluate our impact. Yeah. So,
okay, my closing question. Which is the most important advice you regularly give your PhD students?
I have
I'm sure there are many PhD students listening now, and many are going to watch the recording. So what do you tell them?
My advice comes based on first how I tell them what is the activity that they are now in. I tell them, first you have to understand that what you are engaging now in your activity is a very cruel activity. Why it is cruel? It's cruel. It's cruel an activity because nobody will clap you. First of all, everybody will have to criticize you by definition. Why your work doesn't work? Why your model doesn't work? So you will not have many praises. you will not have much of recognitions. And secondly, if you want to get the kind of recognition formal, be prepared for a long run, because by the time your paper gets read, by the time it gets cited, wait. You have to survive until then. And then you are entering into this peer system, you are in a peer review system, which is much more in a crisis today. And then this opens the whole range of questions for you. How are you going? What will be your strategy? Are you aiming high? What if you get terrifying reviews? Are you going to stick to that? What topics you will choose? So you're faced with a range of questions which are not a kind of scientific objective, because in social sciences especially, this is also a social political system, and you have to have a lot of guts and energy to go through that. So you will have a very low points, and try to stay straight, and try to stay sane. And many of the choices that you will be faced will be also moral choices, whether you go more opportunist route, whether you go kind of more what your instinct tells you. So the fact that you are in that area doesn't resolve you of the problems of which you even didn't dream until now. So it's a cruel activity. Try to stay, true to your ideals, connect with the good people, and try to enjoy it. So that would be at the end, the final point.
Your ideals and try to enjoy it. Yes,
exactly.
Definitely. Try to enjoy it. It's a very tough life. Thank you very much. It's been really fascinating to discuss with you. And I will hand over for the 5-minute break. Arthur.
It's a great pleasure. Pleasure as always, Carlota.
Exactly. Thanks a lot, Carlota, for putting the class together. And thanks a lot, Slavo, for providing your insights. And as mentioned, we have 5 minutes now. So I'll see you when the clock ticks, for me, 2 in the afternoon, 1 in the UK, and so on and so forth. So see you in 4 to 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
So meanwhile, we have a brief announcement, small announcement. Our next.
Welcome. You were clear.
Yeah.
You were clear. You were clear. It was not.
Yeah.
I think.
Our next conversation is on 28 January. Between we feature Professor Abdelkader Jaflat. Abdelkader will be interviewed by Alexis Javier on 28 January 2024. We will alert you. We have plenty of time. We'll send you the brochure and the program details as usual. And one particular word of thanks to University of Malaya North-South Research Center, UMNSRC, for providing, supporting us with the Zoom platform. And this is a joint effort, a collaborative effort between Association for South-South Cooperation for Innovation Systems Transformation, ASSIST UK, CRIS Network, and University of Malaya North-South Center. And particularly, I thank Professor Angathevar Bhaskaran, who has been instrumental in this support. Thanks, Bas, for this. Perfect timing, Arda.
Perfect. All right.
Yeah.
I think we have a guest that we need to remove, though. So let me just take a moment.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. I think I
You can do
found
that.
it.
You are a co-host. You can do that.
Yeah. I expelled it.
Please,
All
yeah.
right. Okay. So we're back. So right now, welcome back. The next hour, we have a panel of 3 scholars, and they'll have questions and have comments towards Slavo's work. After the response to the panel, the audience will be invited to participate. So each of the panelists will have around 12 to 15 minutes to interact with Slavo, and I'll quickly introduce them. So today we have GABRIELA DUTRENIT, PhD from SPRU, full professor of economics at the Universidade Autónoma Metropolitana, UAM, in Mexico City. She's been a long-time coordinator of LALIX, the Latin American part of GlobalX. We have Nicholas VONORTAS, PhD in economics from the New York University, professor of economics and international affairs at the George Washington University in the US. He's senior associate dean at the Elliott School of International Affairs. And third, YANNIS CALOGHIROU, PhD in Industrial Economics at NET UA, the National Technical University of Athens, where he's an emeritus professor of economics of technology and industrial strategy, and co-founder and former director of the Laboratory of Industrial and Energy Economics. So, Gabriela, please go ahead.
Okay, thanks a lot, Arthur, for the invitation to participate in this conversation. It was very interesting, the interaction between Carlota and Slavo, very interesting. And let me put some points that in some way were approached, but I would like to focus my questions in this point that are important for developing countries and emerging economies. No, first of all, the analysis of catching up in emerging economies is directly related to the reduction of productivity gaps. In contrast, the analysis of the accumulation of technological capabilities refers to other technical, organizational, and management dimensions of companies and countries. How much do these two approaches dialogue, or has the catching up approach surpassed that of technological capabilities? And connected to that, because you were talking a lot about the issue of the metrics, which is a concern that you have in relation to these processes, for which approaches is there the most shortage of metrics?
Yes, you are pointing to really a huge gap when economists, macroeconomists, you read all kind of these respective highly ranked, regarded reports where technology is reduced on total factor productivity, on productivity, while we do not operate neo-Schumpeterian economies. We do, I mean, sometimes you find that, but it's not the dominant metrics because we can capture technology in a much more direct way. So the way I see it, I see that the technology capabilities, they are, first of all, they are indicators for me, indicators of, it depends how you treat it as an input or an output, but labor productivity is something which you see as an output, while technology capability for me can be considered not as an objective also by itself, but as a kind of input, as a capacity which tells me what is the possibility for that economy to increase further productivity. But I wouldn't idolize productivity as such, because not to talk about the total factor productivity, which we don't know what it is. There is a lot of critical papers about it, but the productivity itself, you don't know what is behind that, because you can achieve high productivity in the short term, simply underpricing labor. You can have very high productivity in some sectors simply because they're monopolists. You may have a productivity behind which is a simply different structure, kind of structural differences, So for me, these are not two approaches which should be in competition. The issue is only that where some jobs will have to be done, how to bring technology in its different facet as a part of the toolbox of macroeconomists. How do you bring technology into macro modeling? That would be, for me, the challenge. So any kind of, finally, if you read very good reports, they will always rely on much more direct indicators of technology capability. It doesn't mean they will not have a labor productivity, but I think this should be a different size of the story. And as long as economists understand what they give you, I think this is more about the good coexistence rather than one displacing the other. So that would be the way how I see that. Yeah.
But researchers from Asia use the catching up approach, but researchers from Latin America, we don't like this approach, and we use more development and technological capability accumulation. We try to focus on the discussion on other sides, much more related with what development means in terms of economic, social, also environmental issues, and not just that catching up that is measured by patents and etc.
Asians do it because they could more clearly show, that they were catching up. Although what drives that, then it opens huge debate, that is another side of the story.
Yeah. But anyway, related with this, the same issue, what type of policies are most directly related to this approach? I would think that in the catching up approach, there is more interaction with industrial policy, while in the accumulation of technological capability approach, the STI policies matter more. What do you think about this and why?
I think this is a kind of what you are pointing is maybe more echo of the past, where really the, let's say in EU, until recently, there was no industrial policy, there was only innovation policy, and there was a strong distinction between these two. But now this distinction is breaking up. It's breaking up in the sense that US has a very strong industrial policy. EU is building industrial policy. That industrial policy cannot be only industrial policy. It has to be linked to innovation policy. Moreover, now we have this transformative innovation policy, which you can call just transformative because it's also about the industry, where the whole issue of broader transformation, where innovation is not the only one, but it's one important ingredient. So I think we have to understand that the current context blurred much of our kind of previous concepts. So I would say that we are now more in a kind of integrated area where these distinctions are less helpful. They're not so useful as they used to be in the past. Yeah. So of course, different parts of the world are in different stages of that. I'm talking from the position of the EU, where this transformative is a mantra of the day. While in other parts of the world, I can see that this is still not in the agenda even of academics. So,
I agree. Well, let me move to another, the last question, which is related to this, but in relation to the transformative innovation policy framework, which is today under discussion as one of the frameworks in the innovation policy, How useful is the transformative innovation framework for these two approaches, particularly the emphasis that this transformative innovation policy put on local experimentation rather than national issues?
Yes, now you are hitting the emerging problem, because everybody kind of on a conceptual level accepts transformative innovation policy. But we were in contact recently because I'm editing with a colleague who's trying to edit a research handbook on regions and transformative innovation policy. And we are struggling to find contributors from emerging economies, so kind of from the global south, which tells me that, even on a conceptual level, the idea is still not kind of recognize, although we understand that the nature of climate change requires solutions which are broad, transformative, which cannot be confined on industrial innovation policy. And in that context, nobody knows how to go about it. I mean, that's how it is. Of course, we have in terms of experimentation, we only have randomized controlled trials, but try to apply that innovation. I mean, God help you, because you can't do it, So we are at the early stages of thinking, including Europe, which is supposed to be on forefront of that, how to go about the experimental policies. And this is a big question. If you want to do a PhD on a new exciting topics, then in innovation policy, then experimental policy would be one of your topics. So highly recommend it.
No, yeah, we have to experiment in policy. The point is the level of the experimentation, the focus, and the lack of connection.
Yes, now you hit the right point, because my recent issue is in the paper which you had, which is, yes, experimentation, fine, everybody accept it rhetorically. But then you have a conventional public administration who says, hey, where is my money? Where I've gave you so much, what is the return? So you have this clash between accountability and experimentation. And then what you get, you get mimicry, you get, kind of just rhetorics without much changing in practice. Yeah, so.
Okay, thanks a lot. And then I give the floor to Rashid or to Arthur. Yes, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Gabriela. So now we have Nick VONORTAS, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation here. I am honored actually to see all these good, important people that I have been reading from throughout the years and learning from, right? The discussion, the questions of Gabriela actually, and the discussion with Slavo reminded me of the struggle that we had with Slavo 2 years ago in the book that we published by Oxford University Press, right? The challenges of technology and economic catching up in emerging economies. On the struggle was that on the editorial list, it is 2 people from East Asia, 2 Lees, Kun Lee, who everybody knows, and John Dong Lee, and on the other side, Slavo, and myself, and somebody else, Meissner, from the Higher School of Economics. The struggle was indeed as between this catching up and the capabilities, the technological capability, the accumulation. Remember, Slavo, I really like this. Anyway, so Slavo, my background is economics. I am actually, I was educated in mainstream econ, all the way from beginning to the end. And even today, I teach straightforward econ, as well as strategy, policy on science, technology, innovation. So my question, throughout these years, I saw migration of economists in this field from departments of economics, actually, to business schools and to schools of international affairs or public policy and so forth. So my question is, what do you think, in your opinion, what have been the successes of economists here in studying innovation, and what have been the major misses? Why economics departments, the formal economics departments, do not seem like they are central players in this debate today?
Yeah, your question actually, I have to explain it because I have a title professor of innovation studies, and I work with economists. And I try to explain it to students in the way that economists operate in a 2-dimensional world. They have two world which consists only of 2 dimensions. One is the incentives And only recently, since 1990s, they discovered that there are institutions which are kind of enmeshed with incentives. Why incentives? Because in incentives, relative prices matter, and any technological change is instant. You don't have problems on a kind of long term. Innovation studies, people we bring in economic two-dimensional world, we bring third dimension, which is the capabilities, because capabilities do not, change automatically. That they are cumulative, that they take over time to develop, that not result only on market incentives, that there are non-market incentives, the whole academic system, and so on. So this is about talking about the people with two-dimensional, with three-dimensional world. And that's why it is so complicated. That's why I see that kind of, because bringing third dimension means that you really have to understand what is the interaction, what is the co-evolution of these different dimensions. I mean, this is not only from me. I was surprised to see a long time ago, late Sanjay Alal, he had the same kind of idea about that. Because this is the dimension that we bring into the analysis of economy, which fundamentally changes how institutions and incentives are interacting with capabilities. And that becomes much more complicated. So I think that despite that we were so much separated, I think that there is a gradual process of convergence because of the acceptance that economies are complex systems. And again, I come to this instrumentation because there is a new instrumentation which can show that economies are complex systems. You can do also system modeling. So as long as we accept that economies are complex evolving systems, so that gives them more scope to bring economists and innovation studies people together. So that's my kind of, if you want, very kind of generic conceptual answer why we operated in a different worlds. Because none of the categories which people in business school use is related to capabilities wouldn't come into macroeconomic model, wouldn't come in a conventional microeconomics. So bringing that in changes a lot. And we are now in the process of kind of very confusing world where there are different paradigms. It's actually very good for any young scholar because everything is open. There is not anymore, I think there is not anymore big church. So that's the kind of Giovanni's all the time, fight with a great church. Yeah, this is how I described it. I don't know if you agree with that.
I very much agree, but I also see that the Schumpeterian economics, or whatever the evolutionary Schumpeterian, whatever that is, has some limitations as well, in the sense that it has not managed actually to incorporate, effectively incorporate other aspects of the economy that are of critical importance. I mean, finance is not a big thing in that type of economics, and yet it is extremely important, right? So I would think that it's necessary for the two to get closer.
Exactly. I mean, you just hit the right area, finance. I mean, you can list on one hand kind of number of papers which tries to really integrate finance into it. There are really gaps in that area. But that is also because of the qualitatively different nature when you think about the capabilities and then finance and this relationship. I think this cannot be done simply by mechanically bringing them together. You need almost like a paradigmatic change in how you conceptualize that, because these are very different concepts. There is, of course, this theory about the boundary objects, objects which sit in between two. So there has to be some really new thinking in order to integrate these things.
Yeah, and to tell you the truth, I am encouraged by the fact that I see some new newer than me. I'm old, so people who come later, who actually try to do this integration. Like I have in mind Nicholas Bloom, that I like very much, his material, who seems to be able to navigate on both sides, and present very, very good work. Okay,
Yeah,
so. So I think when we are thinking about where is a pretty fertile area for young people to go is that intersection of the two fields, that needs to be worked out somehow.
Exactly. Exactly, but the problem, with academies, problem are always strict disciplinary boundaries, which comes from the organization of academy into departments, and that's a chronic issue. Some places are more open than the others.
Yeah, that's true. So I will stop here. I will pass the baton to Yannis, and perhaps I come up with some other questions later. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So yes, please, Yannis, the floor is yours.
You're muted.
Okay.
No, you're fine. Yeah.
So, well, I would like to congratulate Rajes and the organizers for choosing this Slavo Carlota conversation, because they were having a conversation for many years, and I hope it would be very nice if you had CRIS still here but his spirit is going across this event. Now, I will pose a question regarding policy innovation, as Carlota mentioned before. But before that, I want to make some comment on the previous discussion. I believe that there is a big problem in economy. I have a joint background, and I have worked in both industry, public service, and academia. So perhaps I'm a bit biased by what I say, but I believe that there is a need for real-life economics, and this, in my is the misunderstanding of the mainstream economics, that they have usually they have another. There are two worlds: the world of the mainstream and the real-life world that. People in the innovation studies, management, economics, the industrial economics, they are working. So it is very important nowadays to have these links between economics, engineering, and management and policy. Because otherwise, I believe that something is missing. For example, talking about policy implications from a pure mainstream analysis, this is then things are very difficult to give some new ideas, etc. So, again, people that are in technical universities or engineering schools, and they are dealing with all this transformation that is taking place in all sectors, not only in the ICT, but also in other sectors, and the merging between ICT, nanotechnology, biotechnology, etc. So these people need also to understand the economic and social consequences of what they're doing, and also how they can handle technology and the new technological, let's say, innovations. And I would like to add that also many people, especially good scientists, they think, natural scientists, they think that innovation is only based in R&D. You have R&D, you have innovation, and the other is not innovation. So this again is another pair of different peoples that they have to work together and to understand both the areas and how not only the areas per se, but how what is the let's say the behavior when they have to solve problems that are, of course, multidisciplinary and not just one direction. Now, saying all this, I believe that the appreciative theorizing in the spirit of Dick Nelson and Winter and all the other CRIS, etc., is something very, very important in order also to, if you want to build a more formal, let's say, framework, it is very important to have this appreciative theorizing before. So I come directly to the question that I need Slavo to answer. The first one is about the theory and practice of smart specialization. He mentioned that. I believe that this is a great transformation in how you are doing industrial policy linked with innovation or regional policy linked with innovation. And I recall in my mind that in 2014, we were both in Vienna, where the St. Peter Society conference was taking place. And there at that time, everybody was a bit skeptical. What is this? How it can be just a theory, and how can be transformed to practice, etc. So based on that, I know from your writings that this skepticism now is a bit going down, and you more and more you think that this is a very good, let's say, merge between innovation policy, other types of policy, and industrial policy. So after 6 years after the book that you were co-edited about the theory and practice of smart specialization, what is your assessment and your, let's say, based on appreciative type of theorizing is now regarding this method, this policy innovation, which started from Europe and it is basically in Europe, and how can this be exported to other places of southern countries or in other places? So this is my question, my first question.
Okay. Yes, I was involved and I'm still involved until here into this type of policy studies on smart specialization, which has emerged as a result of imagination, in fact, of a few academics, but then it took life on its own because it was recognized in kind of in its insight idea by policymakers, although there was no clear design how to go about it. So there was this process of kind of trying to find out what is it, kind of trying to articulate that. And today, after 10 years, there's a huge, it's huge industry. I call it the biggest experiment in innovation policy in the world. And it is, because the number of regions, the number of the funding that comes, the number of people engaged, and the number of papers, the whole industry of papers you can make just today journal on smart specialization, you will have issues every month, kind of. So so there is a lot of kind of there, which is new, which now because of the impact of the EU, because of its simply global position, goes global. But that's one thing. But the second thing is that we have to understand that this is only one of the approaches in innovation policy, which I call, actually, I label it new industrial policy. And in this book, which you refer, I put it in the context of 6 other approaches, which are also present around the world in different forms. Why they all kind of features of the new industrial policy? They are all features of the new approach, which points to from the fact that there is no enlightened policymaker. There is no somebody who has a magic solution how you go about the climate change and what are the type of restructuring changes. That this is something which is where each of the stakeholders in innovation policy has its view on that situation. And therefore, you have to organize the process by which you can kind of elicit these kind of different views and the process of negotiation. So that kind of, and this is something which has been recognized in many other areas of life and in other parts of the world. So there is a lot of which is common there. What happened in the meantime, that we have even increasing complexity before our eyes of the climate change and need for transformative socioeconomic change. There comes this kind of conceptualization through transformative innovation policy. So the smart specialization is not anymore just about your competitiveness, about the one region, but it becomes more about the sustainability. It links to the UN objective. It resonates much more with other countries. But then how do you bring sustainability into that? We have now an industry of papers on the transformative innovation policy, not from innovation policy people, but in Europe, there is a lot of journalists and academics who work on these transformative issues. And this is now a kind of an issue where academics are part of that process. So in a sense, we were complaining before that we are separated, there is this gap, but now there is an opportunity to link up these two things together, because the challenges which we are faced, no academic side does not have recipes, policy side doesn't have recipes. So it's a kind of really process of a discovery where crucial is this institutional context, how you can ensure this interaction. But so the whole issue is now reframed, it's smart specialization for sustainability, which means that your scope, the range of actors which come into that process in transformative change becomes ever bigger, and problem becomes even more complex. So this is where we are now. So at least in Europe, there will be no academic which in some way will not be exposed or will not have to know something about it. And I think it's just an issue of time when where other parts of the world kind of pick up much more strongly on that perspective. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And the second one, because we have, I learned a lot when we had a discussion at SPRU in 1999 about your assessment and your idea about the multiple influence of Chris Freeman. And it was this discussion, part of this discussion was also in the Greek edition of the book of Work for All or Mass Unemployment. And in my view, it was very precise and very interesting. And I believe that you can, if you can say something about that and about the multiple influence that Chris Freeman has at several levels.
Yes, since we talked about that, in the meantime, I had the opportunity to work with Iranian colleagues on the bibliometric analysis of literature on catching up. So, because I'm enough old to be in that area for 30 years, and I know all the people personally, but then you have bibliometric data. You have who is publishing and who is citing whom. Who is citing whom is a sign of let's call it cognitive or scientific links there. And here I want to put Chris Freeman. If you evaluate Chris Freeman on that basis, you will see, yes, important. But because I know Chris, I know people that he influenced, personally, then I can see that in addition to this kind of influence, which is revealed in some kind of objective manner, objective I put in inverted commas, Chris' influence is actually much bigger in terms of personal influences and the way how people think about the issues. When I first read Chris' paper, that was a long, long time ago, and I always keep telling that when I read it, I said, my God, this man is really a humanist. Because I could see although the papers were on technology, but they were difficult to put in one area like this is economics or technological change. No, this was a merger of different insights from the social sciences, humanistic perspective on all of that, which today becomes even more relevant in the view of artificial intelligence, where the boundary between technology and human beings becomes completely inseparable. And therefore, this perspective, I think, will only gain in importance, because it's impossible to separate kind of your human welfare from the technology itself. So CRIS's perspective will be even more important. But the second point here is that the influence that we make through conversations, through explaining the context, this goes well beyond, oh, I read your paper and I saw this genius idea. Because you can influence the way people think, how they can see the problems. You can influence them almost in terms of value and everything. And in that respect, I think those of us who were able to be close to him were in a privileged position. The same as everybody's privileged to be, in the proximity of a really good scholar, because that's where I see the difference, what kind of codified information, what written text can do, and what just personal exchange can do. And that's why I like this, also the way we communicate today, because we communicate outside of the, a paper and what is exactly there. We try to get understanding of the context in which we are. So this understanding is I think, in that respect, CRIS's contribution is invisible, but I can see it in many scholars that work in this area that were exposed to his influence. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so thank you, Yannis. We have some questions from the audience, so if Rajesh agrees, I'll start addressing them or asking people actually to unmute themselves and ask those questions. So we had the question, I don't know if Igor Yegorov will want to ask it himself. It was when we were talking about metrics and some inappropriate ways to use them for policy. Igor, would you like to unmute yourself and ask it? Otherwise, I'll just mention here that I'll just mention that he said that number of US patents not even the most vivid example. How about the importance of the share of foreign students from the non-EU countries?
Yeah, Igor is here. He is from Kiev, so we have to give him time.
This was simply one component of this how to say European indicator, this in the European index. Of course, it's not relevant for our economies. I mean, not only for the Ukrainian economy, but also for the economies of, say, Central Asian countries or, economies of the post-Soviet states. And actually, I have a question to Slavo. Slavo, I remember some years ago you have prepared a special index for East European countries, probably with Croatian colleagues, and you had a presentation. Would it be possible to develop further development of this index? Simply to find some kind of substitution for this European innovation index that we use for developed countries of Europe. First of all, and to compare, Europe with the United States, with Japan, with some other countries.
Yes, I mean, because you are referring to the European Innovation Scoreboard, which initially was designed primarily for ranking, benchmarking European Union with the US and Japan. And then, of course, later on, they had lots of modifications, and we have to appreciate the efforts that people have put and are putting continuously, because they have a almost impossible task to have a metrics which also is changing continuously. You can see that these modifications are quite often. Of course, out of their scope are many of the countries that we are talking, and so we again come to this whether it is possible to have one metrics which is good for everybody. And if we have a kind of really an issue of metrics which is global but is not relevant for everybody. And or whether globally it can be relevant for anybody. You know, kind of everybody would have its own, because it's a dynamic process. So yes, there is absolutely need. I need even now, even more, as we have increasing divergences among countries. And this is the process of the last 10 years, even within the EU, where the EU is not anymore convergence machine. So the necessity to have more matrices which are specific, which are tailored to specific group of countries, because they are much bigger relevance to policymakers and to for understanding what are the technology upgrading challenges. So we just have to find the way to find some funding, not big, for this type of issues. Yeah, completely agree with your expression of need for more relevant matrices.
Yeah, for groups of countries, definitely. Thank you, Slavo.
Yeah.
All right. In my list here, I have David Francis. Please go ahead.
Oh, thank you, and hello to you, Carlota and Slavo. I actually have two questions. The first one, I think I could be accused of special pleading, because I come from a sociological rather than an economic background. And you mentioned, Slavo, that you got a lot out of the study of cases and qualitative research into organizations. And my first question is, why do you think that there's so little interdependence and understanding between those from an economic tradition and those from a sociological tradition? Because after all, a lot of studies are done in both areas on the dynamics of change and what it takes to be innovative.
Why there is so little? Well, one can always use the excuse of the academic boundaries, but that will not leave us, doesn't answer eventually the question. I think there is also a deeper reason, and that is that only recently economists understood that if you look at the data from industrial economics on the firm demography, you see huge heterogeneity among firms in very narrowly defined sectors. And you have a coexistence of highly productive and very unproductive firms. So this huge stylized fact have to be explained. And of course, economists have now idea, okay, we will explain it by organizational capabilities, but we don't know what they are, and we cannot put our hands on it, what it is. We don't have a set of indicators. Actually, you can never explain that specificity, that huge heterogeneity, unless you bring organizational sociology into it. So, but it takes time to come to that. So I said, be patient a little bit. Hopefully somebody will come and will do PhD combining these two perspectives. You know, kind of. Yeah.
I'll put my hand up to have a try. May I just ask one other question? And that is, in the most recent study undertaken by McKinsey of the preoccupations of top CEOs around the world, it was organizational agility rather than innovation, which now comes up as a top 5 preoccupation. In fact, a few years ago, being effectively innovative was in the top 5. I'm curious to know whether or not organizational agility is something which really needs to enter into the kinds of studies which you've been talking about.
I don't have a straight answer, but my first, gut feeling is that you have, in terms of policy, you have that converted on a different concept, and that is the concept of resilience. So this is how I see how policy today tries maybe to relate to this organizational agility as the top concern of CEOs. I don't know. What do you think? Is that the kind of, because resilience is from a macro perspective, is something which policymakers can handle. I don't know if you tell them, oh, organizational agility is something which we have to support. I mean, it's difficult to translate on their language. We are all the time faced with this.
If I could just give a short example, just recently, Mars, not the planet, but the company, have bought a company in the UK called Hotel Chocolate or Chocolat, and by buying that, they move themselves from being a producer of confectionery into being capable of being a retailer. So it's an agile activity rather than an innovation activity. The work is not innovating, the work is acquiring a new resource and an asset. And I see that kind of recombination of resources, acquiring different resources, as being explored within innovation studies as they are typically.
Okay, you are now talking about innovation studies. I was before talking about the policy. Yeah, absolutely right. This is what is the scope of innovation studies? So what you're pointing is that this much broader boundaries of what is the innovation studies, kind of which has to go much beyond the specific innovation as an object. This is what we mentioned in Carlota's about the innovation and learning. Kind of this is a type of changes which are then a part of much broader understanding of what makes organizations different. So I can just say, yeah, exactly on the point.
I will shut up in a second, but coming at it from the point of view of TEAS, what we're talking about here is innovation studies within dynamic capabilities and the interface between the sociology, the economics, and other dimensions of dynamic capabilities, including leadership qualities and so on.
That means rewriting a bit technology management books. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it will keep us out of mischief doing it.
Maybe you should talk to John Besant and make a new addition to get that on board.
I'm going to see him next week, so I'll have a chat with him about it.
So this was useful meeting.
Thank you, Dave. So now, apologies to Thomas, I actually skipped you, but please go ahead and ask your question. Maybe keep it. I saw that you had 3 questions. Maybe you can frame into one big one. Or brief.
Okay, thanks, Archer. I will try my best, to squeeze 3 in 1. So, hi, Slavo. Hi, Carlota. Hi, everyone. Slavo, well, I'm gonna have to pick one of the 2 questions. Let's start with the first one. Policymakers, you mentioned smart specialization. Yes, we did that in the field of innovation studies. We provided this kind of theoretical synthesis to policymakers. Yet policymakers still fall back to the linear model of innovation. So wherever you talk to policymakers, in the end, in the back of their head is that linear model of innovation, linearity. So that was my first question, like, how we deal with this, because that's like the biggest question. No matter what we do in science, no matter if we show them that this model is not a good one, in the end, that's how they deal with innovation. The other point is about us as innovation scholars, and in particular our output, publications. When you look into research policy, over the years, we feel like we're becoming the cheerleaders of mainstream economic methods. All of a sudden, we fell in love with econometrics. Yet CRIS, Carlota here, Nathan Rosenberg, and all these scholars, Nelson Winter, never really use econometrics. So this is for me like another irony. Somehow we discovered econometrics too late and we fell in love with them. So it's a bit ironic. but also would like to hear your thoughts. And last but not least, what lies ahead for neo-Schumpeterian economics? So what is our future? You know, we're young scholars, we really like neo-Schumpeterian economics. So what is for us there? So what do we should be looking at? You know, what are the main issues? Okay, thank you.
Great, because 3 questions. I'll try to be very brief on each of them. On linearity and policymakers, I wouldn't blame. I wouldn't put blame entirely on policymakers. Well, first of all, there is this political element. You know, R&D has institutionalized interest. They have articulated interest, which influences everybody. But the second one is, let's say I'm enlightened policymakers, and I fully take your story on board, but I don't know what to do next. I don't have indicators. I don't have a clear idea of the policy tools. The whole mode of thinking around me is against that. So it's a more complex story where we also have to do much more in terms of providing policy tools which address the other issues which are non-R&D related and indicators. That means, you know, a change in communication with statistical offices, having new type of surveys which point to it. So I think the issue is on both sides. On this mainstream, yes. I mean, well, you picked up research policy which is going mainstream, but this is where the mainstream is. And I appreciate your work. I would like to advertise you here because Thanos is one of the first scholars in innovation studies which applies this logic of critical realism, which is a new philosophy of science, where the whole issue of causality is reframed. And I think the problem with the econometrics is exactly the issue of causality. We know that, you know, kind of that's embodied there. So you need alternative philosophies, and the critical realism as a new philosophy, and Thanos really shows the way how case study can generate new theories, and how the whole view on causality, that the point is on the causality mechanism. So I strongly recommend. So I think, Thanos, I would simply encourage you. Your work is one of the ways which kind of new type of mainstream, which is much closer to understanding the causality, because at the end, that's what science is about. Yeah. Econometrics is always approximation of that, is always approximation. And econometricians, good econometricians are fully aware of it. What lies for neo-Schumpeterians? I think it's you can be very pessimistic, but you can be very, very basically exciting, because technology is all around us in a very different forms. And the boundaries between what was economics of innovation and all other disciplines is really closing so much that I think for a young scholar who is courageous enough to get out of the dominant paradigm, whatever it is his supervisor has, who wants to kind of go around and go into new areas, the same as you did with a critical realism perspective, I think there is a huge opportunity there. So I would be really much more optimistic, because our physical world, the kind of natural world, is now replaced by our virtual world around, which is all about technology and human beings and economy and welfare, individual and social. So there's a new agenda emerging.
Thank you for the advertisement. I didn't expect that. So, but thank you for answering my questions. Thank you.
You deserve that.
So thanks a lot. And we actually missed questions in the chat here, so apologies. Back there we have Dimitri Korpakis. Would you like to unmute yourself, please? And I'll ask all the remaining participants to be brief, as we are reaching the 2-hour time. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just a question to Slavo, since he is very specialized on this. I think you mentioned the debate on industrial policy is back in Europe, but also in the United States. So how would you see the link between, I would say, state-led industrial policies on the one hand, and regional innovation policies, especially in the context of developing smart specialization strategies? You mentioned that, you know, have been discussing this in the past. But I see this kind of controversy between top-down strategies and, I would say, bottom-up, and then you have always the impression that there is no real meeting these two trends somewhere in a more productive way. A good example is the Resilience and Recovery Facility, for example, where a lot of money has been already committed on huge projects without really sufficiently taking into account what is going on the ground and the real capabilities of people in the region. So how would you react to this? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, you are pointing to the state is back in the context of the EU, where actually we have this dominant paradigm of single market. And the challenge is now, how do you bring into the logic of single market, which is the main unifying factor into the EU, how do you bring kind of industrial policy? That's the first challenge. Second is capacities, because it cannot be confined on state. All we were talked about the transformative innovation policy, regional policy. You can think only about the multi-level governance, but then what are the policy capacities? And the issue of policy capacities for transformative innovation policy is still under the carpet. And this is where lots of kind of academics can do in terms of exploring what does it mean institutional capacity. I always was involved once in a project on a country on that, and I had to fight to have a exploration of institutional capacity, because this was not seen as a kind of legitimate issue. So I think it's if we confine it on a state, we are nowhere, because in many East European countries, in many middle-income countries, state is simply very weak. You know, kind of it's a weak actor. So you have to think in a broader terms, what is the policy capacity, which can be generated also by other players in the economy, industrial association, regions, and so on. So there is, again, a need for a change in the paradigm in thinking. It's not state or market, but it's a more complex world. Yeah. So that's because we are running out of time. I'm trying to be as brief as possible. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. So we have a comment and a question from Dmitry Prehanov. So maybe you could ask your question, Dmitry, and people can read your comment on the chat. Thank you.
Thank you a lot for this very insightful discussion here. I have a question about the policy design in transition economies and, so to say, developing countries. Because, well, there might be some insufficient progress in innovation policy designed in transition economies. And one of the major reasons for that might be that policymakers have narrow understanding of the innovation policy space. And because of prevalence of top-down regulatory approaches, they cannot achieve the policy objectives. So, well, one of the questions might be how to enable soft law mechanisms in innovation policy in transition economies.
Well, they say this is $1 million question because there is no simple answer. But I think the way I would structure the issue is, first of all, that the capacity for policy design is only one of the type of capacities which are deficient. Because at the end, design, you can even outsource it, give it to World Bank, but then you have to have capacity to implement it. Then the whole new type of policies is not just somebody design fully. You can design some basic things, but policy of this type of transformative innovation policy, which engages a large number of stakeholders, has to be co-created with them. If I'm not part of the policy process, the policy design process, I will not be basic. I will do everything to destroy it. I can give you an example from my own kind of advisory activities where ministers simply put it in a drawer because they were not part of the process, full stop. And then you have to have policy for monitoring, evaluation, for learning based on that. So it's a kind of more complex issue where you cannot confine it just on the design. So as long as you persuade policymakers that they have to think in a more broader terms, what is their policy capacity, then you can do some improvements. Yeah, so that is the...
Right. I see that Attila has said that he has a comment, and perhaps you could ask yourself and be perhaps brief as well.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to see good old colleagues and meet new colleagues. we were talking a lot about metrics. I would like to share an anecdotal evidence showing that in the EC circles, in the European Commission circles, measurement of innovation, the innovation scoreboard, and especially the European Innovation, the Summary Innovation Index, is a political issue as well. So it's not, referring back to Mariana, it's not only innovation is political, but the measurement of innovation is also political. So someone who is very close to this process has shared the evidence that he or she was talking to the colleagues working for the Commission, for the relevant unit in the Commission, and they admitted that it is a weak attempt. I mean, in terms of methodological, in the mirror of methods, it's really weak. There is no need to repeat why it is weak. But the kind of verdict was, yes, we know it's weak, but because it is interesting for politicians and also it gathers some press coverage, we continue like this. And a somewhat related point is that we were also talking about measurement, qualitative and quantitative methods, political economy of innovation. So my concern is that economics of innovation is, and Thanos mentioned that quantitative studies, econometrics is becoming very popular in research policy as well, for instance. So my concern is in that respect that economics of innovation might not be social science anymore. When it started by colleagues at SPRU many years ago, 50 years ago or so, it was truly social science, and Slavo has stressed that it has to capture its nature, that's feature, because it's a societal and political process. But unfortunately, because of the kind of tyranny of methods, it would be really difficult to maintain that approach, that angle. Thank you.
Okay, this is a comment, nice comment. Yeah, reflects. I can give more extreme examples where the indicator becomes policy objectives. I worked some time ago in country which is now on the other side of the wall, Belarus, where they established interministerial group whose task was to see how they can improve on different indicators of global competitiveness index so that they go up. So the idea was not what do we do about education? No, what do we do so that this indicator we are up? So collectively we are kind of acceptable. And this is not only that country. So this is a complete perversion where the indicator is not just a poor proxy of reality and we have our real policy objectives, but indicator itself becomes objective. So
you are talking about the current Hungarian government as well.
Okay. A country has joined the club. Okay.
Yes, very prestigious club, very promising.
Okay.
Okay, so we are heading towards the end, but Rajesh told me that we have some minutes if someone has like a really urgent question to be made, and we can definitely address it now. No urgent ones, no problem. This is, I guess, more of a long discussion topics anyway. So I'd like to thank all the participants of this webinar, the audience. It's very important that you show up. And Thanos, do you have something? No. Okay. And I'd like to thank especially the speakers, Slavo, Carlota, Gabriela, Nicholas, and Yannis. And a special thanks to Rajesh and the CRIS team. They do an amazing work putting these webinars together, organizing everything. I'll thank Professor Bhaskaran of the University of Malaya North-South Research Center for the Zoom and website support. And Rajesh, if you want to put up the slide with the next webinar so people can see what are the In Conversation series next event will be about. And there you have it. So thank you very much for attending it, and I hope to see you on January 28th next year.
Thank
All
you
right.
to Arthur, to Rajesh. Thanks to everybody, colleagues, for your time. Much appreciated. See you sometime somewhere. Okay.
Thanks, Slavo.
In person.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you for organizing wonderful event. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the
Thank you
support.
all.
Thank you very much.